Hello and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you've left for me in the comments section of my Q&A videos or have sent to me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com. I'm only going to put in a little plug real fast this week for my critical merchandise. I just wanted to throw that reminder out there that merchandise stuff is out there. I'm not wearing it right now, but it's there, and the link is below. It is Christmas season, and I can't think of a better time to share some critical thinking and Scientology humor and that sort of thing with your friends and family. So that being said, also I got some great responses last week on the question of a live show, and we are definitely going to do that for the 100th episode. It will not be, by the way, a call-in episode where you're going to call me or something. The way it works is there will be a way for you to message me, with your keyboard with questions, and we'll set that up so you can ask me that way. So I just dived in yesterday to figuring out the technical ways to go about doing that. You wouldn't think it would be that complicated, but it kind of looks like it is. So anyway, I'll figure all that out in the next month or two so that we can do that for our 100th episode. But I don't think I'll be doing that. I don't think I'll be changing the format of the show otherwise, based on some of the responses I got. You guys like this show the way that it is. I like putting it together the way that it is. So I think we'll just kind of keep it this way, except for that special 100 episode. So we got a lot of stuff to cover this week, so let's get to it. Kiwi Gal. I believe there was a bit of a misunderstanding in episode 83 where you answered John Stewart's question about the decorated forms, and your answer related solely to certificates. Please see the attached where, in this instance, a routing form has been decorated with highlighter pens, etc. These pop up quite often on Thursday Funnies pages, etc. I also would like to know where this originated. Any ideas? So you guys can see the photo here that was sent to me to clarify this, and I do see now that I had not particularly recognized what was going on here, or what that question that Johns was asking me about with these decorated routing forms. I thought he was talking about the certificates that people get when they finish services. But with this question, yeah, I can. The routing forms are just pieces of paper that have a series of people that you go see in an organization, in a Scientology organization, when you either finish a course, start a course, doing various activities in the organization. These routing forms walk you through the steps you need to take in order to get where you're going or whatever, and I think I've explained those before. So here's the thing. The staff members in an organization operate on what they call the spirit of play. They try to make things fun and exciting. Hubbard wrote early on in the 1952, I think, in the Philadelphia Doctorate Course Lectures of December 52, he gave this quote about the spirit of play, how high-toned and amazing and wonderful it was to be, insouciant and playful and that sort of thing, and how, that just poking fun at things, not taking things too seriously. And this is a big thing in Scientology because it's counterpointed against the seriousness of what Scientology is all about, what it tells itself it's all about. The staff members read Keeping Scientology Working and other policy letters, and they get this very deadly serious activity, because that's what Hubbard literally says. He says it's a deadly serious activity. And so you can get very, very, about getting Scientology to people, right? But he counterpoints it in various places with this idea of the spirit of play, where people really only get things done and are really only effective when they are light and airy and playful. And I know this sounds crazy because you hear about all these horrible things that go on in the Sea Org, and you're like, well, these people aren't being very playful, and you're absolutely right. This is just one of those dichotomies that exists in Scientology, and depending on the mood of the people involved at any particular time, will depend on how you're treated. So if things are tough and rough and like there's heavy, serious quotas to be met, and it's going to be doom and gloom, if those quotas don't get met, then things get pretty heavy. But some staff, and this is especially at the class 5, at the local org staff level, is where you really, where things are a lot less grim than they are in the Sea Org. you tend to see more of this spirit of play sort of thing going on. You see it a little bit in the Sea Org, but not really that much. Most of the time in the Sea Org, things are pretty grim. But at the staff level, things get, but then people remember to lighten up and not take things so seriously. Okay, but that doesn't mean that they are not serious about getting their quotas met. Okay, they have to get these things done. They have to get so many people completed on courses every week. They have to get so many new people in. They have to get so many books sold. They have to get so much money fundraised for their building or whatever, or money made for the organization by selling services, right? So these are stiff, tough quotas that they always have, and they're always under the gun to make them. But especially when they associate with the public, they try not to, have all that doom and gloom rub off on the public. They want Scientology to be fun and interesting and exciting, okay? And I hope I'm explaining this so that it kind of makes sense, because it really is. I understand the dichotomy of it. I understand that the opposites of this, but this is where this answers this question, because what they do is they try to get the public to come in late, come in early, do their services. Like, for example, when I used to be a course supervisor, I had quotas to meet on how many completions I was supposed to get every week from courses. I was supposed to get 3. I completed 3 people last week on courses, so this week I need to get 4, right? And so I'm going to have to go through and see who's close to completing a course and convince them to probably put in some extra time in order to finish this week. So in order to do that, I'm not going to call them and say, it's my ass if you don't finish your course. That would suck, right? That would make it sound like the org was a horrible place to be. Staff sucks, Scientology sucks, it's all horrible. You can't communicate like that to the public, not most of the time. So instead, you go, hey, we're playing the birthday game and it's very exciting, and last week we got 3 completions and this week I want to get 4, and I need you to put in some extra time this week. So can you come in right after work, or can you take a day off work and come in like all day Tuesday or all day Wednesday and put in the time necessary to finish your course? And this is routine. This goes on all the time in the orgs, right? The staff get the pressure, and then they pass it on to the public by trying to pressure them through this gamey sort of, isn't this fun? Isn't this exciting sort of thing, okay? And it's all sort of this like, ha ha ha, sort of, it's fake. It's fake as hell, but they try to, there's these poor staff, man. They try to make it fun, okay? So they convince the public to come in and do these things, and then they're going to reward the public, right? And they're going to make it a game. And so that's why you see pictures like this where you see highlighters and bright colors, and they'll give special certificates and awards and commendations, and maybe they'll buy the guy lunch or buy him a cake or do something for the public person who is, in their eyes, going above and beyond to help them get their stats up, the staff members, so that they don't get killed. And that's the genus of this whole thing, okay? And that's why you see all this like woohoo going on in the organizations, right? I think it was just yesterday, or this is coming up on Sunday, so I think it's 2 days ago, that Tony Ortega posted some videos on his blog of fundraising, and all the staff and public are doing a conga line and all this sort of thing. That's another example of what I'm talking about, where they try to, game up this stuff and put all this fake enthusiasm into this stuff to try to get the public excited so that they will be part of meeting the quotas that the staff have to meet because of the intense demand that's being pushed down on them. So there you go. Cassie W. Everyone is intrigued by the story of Michelle Shelley Miscavige, the vanished wife of Scientology leader David Miscavige, who is supposedly at an isolated mountain retreat. Do you think she remains wherever she is of her own free will, or is she imprisoned either physically or mentally? Is COB still married, or did he divorce her, as some reports speculate? Is the LAPD officer who talked with her a Scientologist himself, as per Tony O's writings, or did she have someone else present while she was being questioned? I'd really like to know this. Well, I'd really like to know too, Cassie. I mean, I've addressed the question of Shelley, or Shelley has come up on this show, on this series of shows, 3 times now. And I'm not going to talk about her anymore. I'm done talking about Shelley. I have said everything I really know how to say about her. Tony Ortega has done some great digging and reporting on it, and has said, pretty much everything I know about Shelley is what I've read from Tony, because I never even met her when I was in Scientology. Hardly anybody at my level did. I didn't even know David Miscavige was married for the longest time. News to me, right? So, so I don't really have a lot of personal knowledge about this. In order to answer questions about her, I can give you my subjective, suppositions. I can give you my ideas about it. And my ideas are that she's there quite willingly, in the same way that I was there willingly. In other words, I did 3 years of an RPF, a Rehabilitation Project Force program in the Sea Org. It was hell. It was absolutely hell. It was the worst experience of my life. Was I there willingly? Well, yeah, I have to say that I was. I mean, I could have left. And had I chosen to leave, which I eventually did when I left the Sea Organization in 2012, I was no longer willing to be there. And I said, hey, I don't want to be here anymore. And I left. She has that same power. She can leave anytime she wants. Which is not to say she can just get up and walk out the door, although that they couldn't really stop her if she really wanted to do that, unless they physically restrained her, and then they're breaking the law, which I'm pretty sure at this point they're not going to be so willing to do, especially with somebody like her. If she wants to leave, she can go. And the fact that she's there is a question of undue influence. I mean, she was raised with this. She was one of L. Ron Hubbard's, those children messengers who waited on him and whatnot. I mean, she was there on the ship with Hubbard. So she's been at this her entire life. She has no other frame of reference. But like I mentioned before, I don't have a lot of sympathy for her. She's David Miscavige's wife and was for decades. And was very much part of, all the horrible things that we, look at David Miscavige as having done through the 80s and 90s and 2000s. Well, she was the closest person to him and was his personal assistant through most of those years. So, so I don't really have a lot of sympathy for her, because I, know from my own view and take on things that, that she has power of choice over her circumstances, right? And ultimately speaking, that's what she has. But I feel for her like I feel for everybody in the Sea Org, in terms of, the mental and psychological and emotional traps and everything that have been laid within the framework of Scientology and within the framework of the Sea Org. And those are very real. And I don't mean to downplay any of that or make less of that. But, she can pop out. As far as answering these other questions about, is COB still married or divorced her? I don't know. How would I know that? Or did the person who talked with her, the LAPD officer, was he a Scientologist? That's first I heard of that. So, I don't remember reading that in Tony's article. I know that the Church of Scientology does have lines into the LAPD, very strong. They've worked many, many years to create a relationship with the LAPD. And that exists, no question about it. So was the officer who spoke with Shelley, if an officer did indeed speak with Shelley or went and checked up on that and filed that report, was he friendly to Scientology? Well, I could very much see how he could have been. Was he a Scientologist himself? I doubt that. But I don't know. I can't really say for sure. So I would like answers to some of these questions too. But I thought I'd address this because I wanted to have a final, that's it, I'm not talking about Shelley Miscavige anymore, statement on this, and sort of get it all off my chest as to where I come from on that one. I would be the first in line to welcome her out if she came out, and I would be very interested in anything she had to say about her experiences in Scientology. I'd be very sympathetic toward any plights that she was involved in, but at the same time, she has some explaining to do if and when she comes out of Scientology as to some of the things that David Miscavige got up to that she, allowed to occur. So that's, there's two sides to that. So that's all I can say about that. Failed Teacher 1. I'm interested in the teaching methods used and where these originated from. I can imagine the ashtray exercise, although at first glance it might appear a bit odd, it could actually be quite effective at getting someone to improve their ability to focus. There's allegedly an exercise where a couple stare at each other without blinking if possible for hours. Someone in a Mark Bunker interview claims this is not entirely dissimilar to a hypnosis exercise. One of the more sensationalist YouTube sites suggested similarities between some of LRH's original exercises and CIA counter-interrogation training methods in the 1940s. I cannot verify any of this, it may all be untrue. However, the pre-Church of Scientology Dianetics movement in the early 1950s was enormously popular for a very brief period. I wonder if anyone has looked at where LRH got his teaching exercises from. He must have been doing something right. He did draw people in like a magnet. It ain't easy to create a new religion which outlives its creator by 30 years and which causes people to devote their lives entirely to its propagation. I wonder what worked, why it worked, and who originally created these exercises. Your question demands an answer that is far outside the scope of my little half-hour-long show. I have talked in other earlier episodes about the study tack not being something that Hubbard himself invented or created, but he stole it and took credit for it. A couple Scientologists who I think were English teachers in the mid-1960s actually came and gave it to him and said, hey, we have these ideas, and he immediately appropriated it and was lecturing on it as though it was all his discovery. And then within a year or two, they were declared suppressive people and were kicked out of the church. As far as earlier indoctrination techniques and training methods, I have heard or read that Hubbard's kid actually came up with some of those upper indoctrination TRs, the ashtray drill you're talking about, where you focus intention on, putting your intention into an object, and then a later drill has you putting your intention, your beams of intention into a person in order to get them to do what you want them to do. And so that's what I heard, is that was those drills were dreamed up by his son, or his son and him, or his son and somebody else in collaboration. I don't know. I do know that Hubbard, was a blatant plagiarist, and almost from day one of Dianetics, he was plagiarizing, things we've talked about at length on my channel. Madame Blavatsky, Theosophy, Freud, Aleister Crowley. I mean, there's this whole gamut, this whole array of things that Hubbard picked and chose things from, right? CIA counter-interrogation techniques, I don't know. To me, that sounds like a bit of a stretch. I don't know how Hubbard would have any personal knowledge of 1940s CIA counter-interrogation techniques, and whatever he might have learned in the Navy, I suppose. But other than that, I don't really know how he would have any lines in on that. Although Hubbard would be the first to claim that he did. I mean, he'd be the first to tell you, "Oh, I know all about what those CIA boys are doing." He could spin you all kinds of tales about that. But the teaching techniques of Scientology come from a lot of different places, obviously, is what I'm saying. And it wasn't all Hubbard's development that he all just came up with by himself. I don't know about the TRs, the TR0, which is the staring at each other for hours at a time thing. I don't know if Hubbard personally came up with that or not. That was 1955, I believe, 56. I think it was 1956 that those were developed as drills to learn to improve communication skills, based on a 1955 book Hubbard put together called Dianetics 55, where he laid out the communications formula, right? And then there were these drills developed to practice communicating. And I will tell you, I have said before that, there is some effectiveness to some of those drills. They are helpful at, being able to, talk to people, listen to people, understand, acknowledge them when they talk to you, look them in the eye, that sort of thing. Nothing wrong with any of that. I think it goes a little extreme when you're sitting there for 2 hours staring at somebody. Of course that's hypnotic. Of course that can put you in a trance. I mean, duh. So yeah, that's a thing, And I'm only being so blasé about it because I know I've talked about this before. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of address the bigger picture of Hubbard's development of this stuff was almost all plagiarized from other sources, which you can track down. You can find this stuff. It's not hard. And some truly original ideas that he did have of his own that he threw in there. And maybe those original TR drills, for example, were his own. I can't say for sure. I don't have personal knowledge of it. So I know that might not be a complete answer for you. Yes, Hubbard was the one who put all of these things together into this body of knowledge called Scientology. Maybe that's his talent, was drawing from all these different places and putting it all together into this sort of framework that kind of made some sense and did produce some results for us people who did it, right? Undeniable, no question about it. I'm not saying that it didn't. My argument about Scientology's effectiveness has always been my argument is not none of it works. My argument is that it's not original to Hubbard, and there's so much destructive stuff connected with Scientology that it far outweighs the effectiveness of what does work. And you can get that effective stuff in other places that are not connected to a dictatorial, authoritarian organization that is trying to ruin your life. So that's what I have to say about all that. And I hope that answers your question to some degree. But if it doesn't, or either you have more about that you want to know that I haven't addressed before, go ahead and let me know, and I'll answer more about that. Katrine Barrett. Have you been able to study Power and Power Plus? These confidential auditing actions are not done by every Scientologist, and I have not heard anyone talk about them. However, I am very interested in them because it was receiving Power/Power Plus that started me on the journey of realizing that there is something seriously wrong with Scientology. I was recently told that a few months ago, Power was revamped again because SPs on the line had been removed again. I've been assured that delivery has now been fully restored to standard tech again. Okay, let's talk about this because this is not something that's talked about a lot, and it's kind of interesting. There is, everybody who watches the show here, or if you're familiar with Scientology, you should know that there is this grade chart of actions that people do when they get into Scientology in order to go up to the stage of clear and then move on up to the next services up to OT, right? But there's this step that's right before clear, okay? And I haven't really talked about this a whole lot, and I'm not going to give an entire, full, extensive briefing on it because, my time is constrained on this show. But here's the deal. When a person starts getting auditing up to clear, they do what's called the grades 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then they receive New Era Dianetics, which is Dianetic auditing with a meter, right? And it's very extensive and very precise, and it's not like Dianetics from the book Dianetics from 1950. It's been, it's more complicated than that. And like I said, it uses the e-meter. A person will receive anywhere from 50 to 100 hours of this New Era Dianetics. And if they don't go clear, if they haven't said that clear cognition or haven't, somehow said, hey, I'm clear, and there's certain things that they look for when a person goes clear. If those things don't exist, then you can complete that step of New Era Dianetics, but you're not clear. So you're now what they say, you're a well and happy pre-clear, but you're not clear. So what do? How do you get on up to OT? Because you can't go to OT if you're not clear. So the step that you do is called, there's a series of steps that are called the alternate clear route. And these were put together originally. These alternate clear route steps were the route to clear. They were the only route. But in the 1970s, Hubbard developed these other things like New Era Dianetics. And because New Era Dianetics was making so many clears, and Hubbard redefined clear, and there was a bunch of stuff. I mean, within the framework of the Scientology belief system and technology, all of this stuff is very, very important and significant. out, if you're just stepping out and looking at the whole thing, you just go, oh, well, it's all just a bunch of crap. Okay, fine. But within the framework of Scientology, this is how it works, okay? So in the 1970s, there was a lot of work done on clear, and a lot of people were going clear on the Dianetics stuff. But there was this original way to go clear that became this alternate clear route for people who didn't go clear on Ned. And that was started, that the start point of this alternate route was a step called Power, followed by a step called Power Plus, okay? And I wrote some things down on this. This was something that Hubbard developed in 1965 in England at St. Hill Manor, right? When he was doing the St. Hill Special Briefing Course and a lot of tons and tons of modern, the way Scientology has been delivered since the 1970s was developed in the 1960s at St. Hill. And Power was originally it was the very first thing that was put out as confidential in Scientology. Like you couldn't know about it until you did it. And the end results of it were confidential, and this was before the whole Xenu story and the OT levels. This was 1965. And people who were doing Power even had to wear badges, right? Saying, I'm on Power, don't ask me about my case. I can't, they weren't supposed to talk about their auditing at all. This was a really puffed up, very big deal back in the 60s, and it still is. If you're on Power now, you still have to wear one of those badges. So here is a quote from Hubbard on this that I thought might give you guys some idea of what it is, how he was promoting this. He said, what is power? How do you get it? How do you control it so it doesn't backfire or disappear? Man has searched for the answers to these questions for eons. History books are glutted with tales of political intrigue and gory battles fought to capture that elusive goal, power. But has anyone ever really gained power with a sword or a gun? Can a person maintain power even if it's given to him if he knows not how to use it? Real power comes from being oneself. When a person has knowledge and certainty of himself and can hold his position, then he is truly powerful. But how can a person hold his own position when the reactive mind works against him, making him forget his true goals and his true identity? The answer exists on power processing. The power processes are a major step towards getting rid of the reactive mind. These knock out all factors of the track, meaning the series of things that have happened to a person. These knock out all factors of the track that force a person back into the reactive mind and leave the person able to get into or get out of the reactive mind easily. The person ceases to respond like a Homo sapiens and has a fantastic capability to learn and act. On power, you'll find out what the forces are that drive a person back into his bank, and you'll become free from their bad effects. So, power was a series of confidential processes that were run by a specially trained auditor to achieve that result, right? Is the person has done all this Dianetics auditing, and now they are going to do these special series of steps that are going to put them no longer, it's not that they've gone clear and they don't have a reactive mind anymore. The step of power was meant to separate them from the reactive mind so that it didn't have so much power over them. Okay, that's how that was supposed to work. And it was supposed to then give the person a lot more certainty and power themselves because they were being more themselves. Now, the very next step after this was Power Plus. And Hubbard also said this about that. He said, once a PC has begun to come out of his bank, he either continues to come out or goes back in a bit. He or she does not remain in status quo. Early on, my PCs went keyed out clear and went away. They stayed that way for a long time. Basically, what he's saying is back when he used to audit people in the 40s and 50s, when he was developing Dianetics, Hubbard claimed that he made a lot of clears. But he later said they weren't really clear. They were keyed out or released from their bank. In other words, their bank was like 50 miles away from them, but it still was there, okay? And this was an excuse that he used as he was developing the tech over all these years, over the 50s and 60s, right? Because people would come back and they were like, I don't feel so good, right? And he'd go, oh, well, the explanation for that is you weren't really clear, you're just released, and now the bank came back. So now I've developed this new process that you can do, and you'll really go clear with this, right? So it was just, it was just more of the same, kind of carrying on the con is really what all this is about, okay? But these steps were supposed to achieve these specific results as a series of actions in order to get the person up to clear. And in case you're wondering, after Power and Power Plus, there was another series of actions the person would learn to do where they would solo audit themselves to clear, to the state of clear. Okay, they'd have to do the solo auditor training. And solo auditing means you're sitting in a room with the e-meter, holding the cans by yourself, doing specific actions, right? Sitting there, responding and whatnot, until you achieve, whatever the end result is. And you go in session every single day doing this. And this is how the OT levels are mostly done. But you would start doing that on this alternate clear route, okay? So that's a lot of, I hope that didn't come across as a lot of gibberish. I'm trying to explain it in layman's terms, but these are advanced levels of Scientology that I'm talking about. So it's a little hard to just throw this out there to people who have no familiarity with the subject at all. Because this is up their stuff, as far as Scientology goes. But that's what it was all about. And also, by the way, one other thing I'll tell you about Power that you might find interesting is that Hubbard claimed that one of the processes that would be run on Power was a process that would technically handle a suppressive person. Hubbard claimed, and I think I've mentioned this before, but Hubbard claimed that a suppressive person in Scientology, right, like me, a suppressive person, was that way because they were stuck mentally in an incident that happened to them millions and millions of years ago. And all of their attention and all of their awareness was stuck in that incident from so long ago. And everybody that they see in their present time environment, they don't see them. They see people from that incident that happened to them, right? And so they're fighting, the way Hubbard put it is they're fighting a battle that no longer exists. They're fighting a fight against people and opponents and enemies that no longer exist. They're delusional. And Hubbard claimed that the only thing that would handle a suppressive person was this specific process on Power. But he then said, but we're not in the business of, curing suppressive people because they're so evil and horrible and awful that why would we want to and why do we care about them? So, screw them. And basically, that's what he said. And so, anyway, I thought you might find that of interest because if Scientology were wanting to deal with us SPs, technically that's what they could do to us or could do with us to handle us. And in case you're wondering, I have never, ever, ever heard of a single person who was declared a suppressive person by the church, handled their suppressive person declare so they could get back in the church, and then was given this process. And that's interesting, isn't it? I've never heard of that. I have seen a very small number of people in all the years that I was in Scientology. I saw a very small number of people who did get back in the church's good graces. They got declared and they did the steps that were necessary to get back in the church. And not one of them that I know of was given this special process. So, I don't know, were they really suppressives? I mean, there's all kinds of, that opens up all kinds of cans of worms. So, anyway, I thought you might find that kind of interesting on top of all this power stuff. So, there you go. Hey, it's time for Flash Answers. Hi, Coordinator. Do you have a favorite type of logical fallacy to spot? No, not really. I wouldn't say I have a special one that stands out as a particular favorite kind of logical fallacy. I practice, trying to see them all the time, and there are, of course, so many of them that it's almost, kind of ridiculous how many different logical fallacies there are. I see ad hominem probably more than anything else in terms of, and I mean real ad hominem, where somebody is saying, hey, you're a dork and therefore everything you say isn't true. Kind of a fallacy. I see that all the time. I think it's sort of the lowest common denominator of logical fallacies is, the third grader bully approach to logic. You're blank, therefore your argument is invalid, sort of thing. That seems to be the most common one. But as far as my favorite kind, I don't know. I think recently I was looking at the anecdotal fallacy as maybe one of my more one I find more interesting than others. George Boslaw, are there any interesting traditions in the Sea Org? Not really. And I'm trying to answer you honestly here. I'm not trying to just be a slipshod in the answer. There are some traditions. There's overboarding. And there's Sea Org Day, where they have, promotions and things like that in the Sea Org. And there are, so there's special days in the Sea Org. There's the Bosun's Party during Christmas time, the Christmas area time of year, where everybody just gets, completely shit-faced drunk. And, and the Christmas party and stuff. But generally speaking, the Sea Org is not they like to make themselves out to be this, old school, traditional sort of naval paramilitary thing, but really it's just a big farce. It really is. So I don't know what to tell you on this one. No, I don't think so. Dave C. How long can the Church of Scientology keep explaining away the lack of superpowers by saying that they are just around the corner? How long will it take for people to snap out of it and realize they are being defrauded? As a never-in, I'm amazed it has gone on for as long as it has. Your thoughts, Chris? On my better days, I try to have a lot of faith in humanity, and I have mostly better days. But on my more cynical days, I really do wonder about this, because it seems that we have an infinite capacity to be fooled and to fool ourselves. And, I just posted a whole podcast this week about critical thinking, and I don't know, some of the responses I get, I just go, wow, why do I even bother sometimes? But generally speaking, I get more positive answers or responses than negative ones, and that gives me some optimism and some hope on it. And I don't mean in saying that to stand on some pedestal and say, I know everything and you guys don't know anything. But when it comes to, our capacity to fool ourselves, oh my God, it just seems infinite. So how long can Scientology keep getting away with what it gets away with? As long as people lack critical thinking skills and the ability to evaluate what's right in front of their face, as opposed to having to, look at everything through a filter of their own cognitive biases. And, I don't know, we're going to have to move in a direction of thinking with and using logic and reason, as really fundamental ways of thinking before we're going to come out of that emotion-laden, feels good, so it must be good kind of thought processes that most of us seem to have because that's how we're put together. And, I've said before and I'll say again, it's easy to laugh at Scientology because of its ridiculousness, its obvious ridiculousness. But how ridiculous are so many of the things that we take for granted, believe must be true because it's always been that way. How many of those things do we have in our lives? Quite a few. So how long? I don't know, till we evolve out of it. But as far as Scientology specifically, its days are numbered. Of that, I'm quite sure. So, we'll see how long it takes. Okay, guys, thanks for coming around. I hope that last answer wasn't too cynical. I'm actually, pretty optimistic guy most of the time, and I really, really love your questions and your feedback, so please keep it coming. I am more than happy to answer anything you guys got for me, so keep them coming my way, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks for coming around. Bye-bye.